What is the price of a person's dignity? For one New York City waitress, it was exactly $1. When the city's most feared and reclusive billionaire, the legendary Harrison Blackwood, sat at her table, she expected a challenging evening. What she didn't expect was the deliberate soul-crushing insult he left behind on a $500 check, a single crisp dollar bill. But this wasn't just any dollar, and her reaction wasn't what he or anyone ever expected. What she did next wouldn't just defy him. It would unravel a decade-old mystery and bring a $3 billion empire to its knees. The air in The Gilded Sparrow was thick with the scent of money and truffle oil. It was a place where conversations were hushed, deals were brokered over seared scallops, and the clinking of wine glasses provided a delicate soundtrack to the city's elite. For Ilara Vance, it was just Tuesday. Her feet ached in her sensible black flats, a dull throb that had become as much a part of her uniform as the starched white apron tied around her waist. At 24, she was a veteran of the service industry, a master of the polite, unobtrusive smile and the art of anticipating a patron's needs before they were even aware of them. Tonight, however, was different. Tonight, Table 7 was occupied by Harrison Blackwood. He wasn't just a regular high roller. He was a phantom, a whisper in the financial world. CEO of Blackwood Industries, a tech monolith with its fingers in everything from satellite communications to advanced robotics. He was a man who moved markets with a single word. He was also notoriously reclusive, rarely seen outside the tinted windows of his armored Maybach or the imposing steel and glass fortress of his corporate headquarters. His presence in a public restaurant was an event so rare it felt like a glitch in the city's matrix. He had arrived without a reservation, his two severe-looking bodyguards scanning the room with cold professional eyes before allowing him to sit. Mr. Dubois, the restaurant's perpetually flustered manager, had practically genuflected before assigning the table to Ilara, his voice a tight, panicked squeak. "Miss Vance, your best, nothing less." Ilara had simply nodded. She had served arrogant celebrities, demanding politicians, and condescending trust fund kids. Harrison Blackwood was just another man with a large appetite and an even larger ego. Or so she thought. The meal was a silent, tense affair. Blackwood spoke only to order his voice, a low, gravelly monotone that seemed to absorb the sound around it. He wanted the pan-seared foie gras, the Wagyu tomahawk rare with a side of asparagus hollandaise and a bottle of the 82 Chateau Margaux, a wine that cost more than Ilara's monthly rent. He didn't make eye contact, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere beyond the restaurant walls, as if the opulent surroundings were nothing more than a cheap, theatrical set. Ilara moved with practiced efficiency. She decanted the wine with a surgeon's precision, presented each course with quiet grace, and cleared plates with the ghostly silence of a seasoned professional. She refilled his water glass exactly once, when it was precisely 3/4 empty. She did not ask, "How is everything?" because she knew a man like Blackwood would find the question an irritating intrusion. She was a ghost, a pair of hands, an invisible cog in the machine of his luxurious evening. The hours ticked by. The other patrons left their laughter and chatter fading into the New York night until only Table 7 remained. Finally, Blackwood pushed his dessert plate away, the remnants of a chocolate lava cake untouched. He made a curt, dismissive gesture with his hand. The check. The bill came to $1,542.50. Ilara placed the leather-bound folder discreetly on the edge of the table and retreated a respectful distance. Blackwood didn't even glance at it. He reached into the inner pocket of his impeccably tailored suit jacket and pulled out a money clip. But he didn't slide out a black credit card. Instead, he meticulously extracted a single crisp $1 bill. He smoothed it out on the table, placed it deliberately inside the folder, and stood up. His bodyguards materialized at his shoulders. Without a word, without a backward glance, Harrison Blackwood walked out of the Gilded Sparrow, leaving a wake of stunned silence. Elara stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. Mr. Dubois scurried over his face, pale. He opened the folder, saw the lone dollar, and his expression crumpled from fear into rage. "Unbelievable!" he hissed, his voice trembling. The disrespect, the sheer arrogance. He turned his fury on Elara, his default setting when things went wrong. "What did you do? Did you say something to offend him?" "I barely said a word, sir," Elara replied, her voice steady, despite the knot tightening in her stomach. "Well, he's clearly sending a message," Dubois snapped, snatching the folder. "This comes out of your pay. You understand every last cent." He stormed off toward his office, already calculating the damage. The other staff members, the busboys and fellow waiters who had been watching from the shadows, began to whisper. It was the ultimate insult. In their world, a tip was a measure of respect, of acknowledgement. A $1 tip on a $1,500 meal was a calculated act of cruelty, a power play designed to humiliate. It was a statement, "You are worth nothing." Elara walked to the table, her legs feeling strangely heavy. She picked up the folder Dubois had thrown back down in his rage. And there it was, a single dollar. But as she picked it up, her fingers brushed against the crisp linen paper, and a strange feeling washed over her. It wasn't just anger. It was something else. Pity. In the man's cold, vacant eyes, she hadn't seen arrogance. She had seen a profound, bottomless emptiness. This wasn't the act of a powerful man. It was the act of a desperate one. She looked closer at the bill. It was old but impeccably preserved, and in the corner, almost invisible to the naked eye, drawn in what looked like faded ink, was a tiny, curious symbol, a star with a single elongated point, almost like a comet. Her breath caught in her throat. She had seen that symbol before. It was hanging around her own neck. The symbol on the dollar bill was no mere doodle. It was a ghost from her past, a phantom limb of a memory she couldn't quite grasp. Elara's hand instinctively went to the small silver locket she always wore tucked beneath the collar of her uniform. Her mother had given it to her on her 10th birthday, one of the last lucid gifts before the fog of early-onset Alzheimer's had claimed her. "From your father," she had whispered, her eyes distant. "So you'll never forget." Elara never took it off. Inside one side held a faded, thumbnail-sized photo of a smiling young man with kind eyes and a familiar jawline, her father, Daniel Vance. The other side wasn't a picture. It was a smooth, polished piece of silver, into which was etched the exact same symbol as the one on the dollar bill, a comet-like star. Growing up, she had asked her mother about him, but the answers were always fragmented, lost in the labyrinth of her deteriorating mind. A brilliant man, an engineer. He had to go away. For work. That was all she ever got. He was a phantom, a man who existed only in one blurry photograph and a cryptic symbol. Back in her cramped fourth-floor walk-up in Queens, the city's hum a distant lullaby, Elara sat at her small kitchen table. The dollar bill lay under the glow of a desk lamp, the locket beside it. The symbols were identical. It couldn't be a coincidence. Harrison Blackwood, a man who lived in a different universe from hers, had just handed her a key, but to what door she had no idea. The next day at the restaurant was brutal. The story of the billionaire's buck had spread like wildfire. Some colleagues offered hushed words of sympathy, while others shot her looks of smug pity as if she were now branded with Blackwood's contempt. Mr. Dubois treated her with icy disdain, assigning her to the least desirable tables near the kitchen, a punishment for a crime she didn't commit. "Forget it, Elara," said Maria, a kind older waitress who had taken Ilara under her wing. Men like that, they're emotional vampires. He fed off humiliating you. Don't give him the satisfaction of thinking about it. But Ilara couldn't forget. It wasn't about the money or the humiliation anymore. It was about the symbol. That night she didn't sleep. She sat in front of her laptop, the dollar bill, and the locket, her only companions. She started with the obvious Harrison Blackwood. The search results painted a picture of a titan, a genius who had built his empire from the ground up. But the articles were all business-focused, filled with jargon about acquisitions, market caps, and disruptive technologies. His personal life was a black hole. No wife, no children, no public friends. The few photos that existed showed him with the same cold, impenetrable expression he'd worn in the restaurant. He was a fortress. Then she tried a different approach. She typed in, Blackwood Industries Scandal. The results were immediate and jarring. An article from the Wall Street Journal dated nearly 15 years ago screamed from the screen, Blackwood Industries chief engineer accused of corporate espionage disappears with proprietary tech. Her blood ran cold. She clicked the link, her hand trembling. The article detailed a massive corporate crisis. The company's most promising project, a revolutionary energy source codenamed Project Chimera, had been compromised. Schematics, prototypes, and research data had vanished overnight. The prime suspect, the lead engineer and architect of the project, had also vanished. His name was Daniel Vance. Ilara felt the air leave her lungs. The screen blurred. It was all there. A photo of her father, younger, but unmistakably him, accompanied the article. He was described as Blackwood's right-hand man, his closest friend, the prodigy, who was set to change the world, and then a traitor, who had allegedly sold the company's future to a rival corporation for an astronomical sum, before disappearing without a trace. It was a lie. It had to be. The man in the photo, the man with the kind eyes, couldn't be a corporate thief. The father her mother remembered as brilliant and good couldn't have done this. This was the reason he had gone away. He wasn't on a work trip. He was a fugitive. Ilara's mind raced, piecing together fragments of a puzzle she never knew existed. Harrison Blackwood, her father's best friend and eventual accuser. The man who had destroyed her family's name and left her to grow up fatherless with a mother who slowly faded away. He hadn't just left her a $1 tip. He had left her a message. But what was it? A taunt, a clue. She looked again at the dollar bill. It wasn't just the symbol. There was something else. It was an old bill series, 1995, but next to the serial number was a small printed star. She Googled dollar bill with star. A star note. A replacement bill printed to take the place of a faulty one. Rare, but not impossibly so. But it was another piece, another detail. Her father was an engineer, a man of details and precision. Everything had to mean something. The insult, the dollar, the star note, the symbol. They were all connected. Harrison Blackwood wasn't just a cruel billionaire testing a waitress. He was looking for something. After 15 years, he was still looking. And in his cold, calculated way, he had just sent up a flare, hoping the right person would see it. And she had. A new feeling began to replace the confusion and the hurt. It was a cold, hard resolve. For 15 years, the world had believed her father was a criminal. For 15 years, she had lived in the shadow of a lie. Harrison Blackwood had started this. Now she was going to finish it. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was Daniel Vance's daughter, and she was coming for answers. The narrative the world had accepted was simple. Daniel Vance was a traitor. He had betrayed his friend, his company, and his country, vanishing into the ether with secrets worth billions. But Ilara knew her father not from memory, but from the echoes of her mother's love and the quiet integrity in his photographed eyes. That man was not a thief. Her first step was to understand the battlefield. She spent every spare moment on her commute during her lunch break, late into the night, devouring every piece of information she could find about the Project Chimera scandal. She learned that the project wasn't just another tech venture. It was a paradigm shift. A clean, hyper-efficient energy source capable of powering entire cities with zero emissions. It would have made Blackwood Industries the most powerful corporation on Earth. The alleged buyer of the stolen data was Blackwood's fiercest rival, Marcus Thorne, CEO of the then upstart competitor Thorne Dynamics. The media had a field day portraying it as a classic story of corporate warfare with her father as Thorne's pawn. But the articles noted a strange detail: Thorne Dynamics never managed to replicate the technology. They floundered for years on the brink of bankruptcy before pivoting to less ambitious projects. If Thorne had paid for the data, he had apparently received nothing of value. It was a loose thread, a detail that didn't fit the neat story of betrayal. Ilara felt like she was chasing a ghost. How could she, a waitress with a dwindling bank account, uncover a truth that had been buried for 15 years under the weight of Harrison Blackwood's immense power and influence? The answer, she realized, was in her father's nature. He was an engineer, a man of systems and logic. He would have built a fail-safe, a breadcrumb trail that only someone who thought like him or someone he loved could follow. The star note and the symbol were the first breadcrumbs. She focused on the dollar bill itself. She took it to a rare currency dealer in a dusty little shop in the West Village. The old man peered at it through a jeweler's loupe. "It's a 1995 series star note, all right," he grumbled. "In this condition, may be worth $10-15. "Is there anything else special about it?" Ilara asked, her heart sinking. "Not really. Just a replacement bill. The print run was out of the Fort Worth facility. Wait a minute." He squinted, adjusting the loupe. "That's odd. The ink on that little drawing, the star thingy, it's not standard. It looks like, well, it's got a high iron content, almost like it was drawn with a specialized technical pen. A technical pen, the kind an engineer would use." That night, Ilara did something that terrified her. She remembered a story her mother used to tell a rambling, fragmented tale about a magic box her father had built for her. A box that held all his secrets. Ilara had always dismissed it as a fairy tale born of a broken mind. But now she wondered. She went to the storage unit. She kept the one holding the few possessions left from her mother's life. In the back corner, under a dusty tarp, was an old, heavy wooden chest. It wasn't locked with a key, but with a strange, circular dial covered in symbols. She had tried to open it as a child with no luck. Now she looked at it with new eyes. The symbols weren't random. They were constellations. And there amongst them was her symbol. The comet star. She traced its shape on the dial. A soft click echoed in the silent storage unit. The lid creaked open. The chest was filled with old notebooks. They were crammed with her father's elegant, precise handwriting, page after page, of complex equations, schematics, and chemical formulas. It was the language of a genius. But tucked into the very bottom was a slim, leather-bound journal. This one was different. There were no equations. It was a diary. She took it home and read it under the dim light of her apartment, her world tilting on its axis with every page. Her father's words were filled with excitement about Project Chimera, but also with growing paranoia. October 12th. Harrison is a visionary, but he's becoming reckless. The investors are pushing for a faster rollout. They don't understand the risks. The power source is stable, but its core is volatile. In the wrong hands. November 3rd. Marcus Thorne approached me today. He knows things he shouldn't know. There's a leak inside the company. I don't trust Harrison's new head of security. November 28th. I've found it. A back door in the system. Someone is mirroring our data. It's an inside job. I tried to tell Harrison, but he's surrounded by new advisors. He wouldn't listen. He thinks I'm being paranoid. December 5th. He accused me today. Harrison, my friend. He thinks it's me. Thorne must have planted evidence. It's a setup. I have to protect Chimera. I can't let them have it. I've initiated the Vance Protocol. The core is secure. They'll have the data, but it will be useless without the key. A key only my North Star will know how to find. My North Star. It was his pet name for her. The final entry was frantic, dated the night he disappeared. They're coming for me. I have to go. Elara, my sweet girl, if you are reading this, know that I did this for you. I didn't run away from you. I ran to protect you. Don't trust Harrison. But the answer is with him. The key is split in two. I have one half. He has the other. He just doesn't know what it is. It's the first thing he ever gave me. Our promise. Find it. The comet will guide you. Elara closed the journal, her hands shaking. Her father wasn't a traitor. He was a hero. He had hidden his life's work to keep it from falling into the wrong hands, and had been framed for it. Harrison Blackwood wasn't the mastermind. He was a pawn, a king who had been checkmated by his own people, manipulated into betraying his best friend. And the tip, the $1 tip, wasn't a random act. It was a search. For years, Harrison Blackwood, the cold, reclusive billionaire, had been quietly, desperately searching for the child of the friend he had wronged. He was leaving star notes all over the world, hoping that Daniel Vance's daughter would recognize the symbol and understand the message. It wasn't an insult. It was a summons. The board was set. The pieces were in place. But a new player had just been revealed, Marcus Thorne, the man who had orchestrated the entire conspiracy. And if he had been monitoring Blackwood all these years, he would surely know about his peculiar tipping habit. He would know that Blackwood was getting close, which meant he might soon be looking for her, too. The Gilded Sparrow felt like a cage. Every clinking glass, every polite inquiry about the wine list grated on Elara's nerves. She was living a double life. By day, she was the quiet, efficient waitress, enduring Mr. Dubois' petty tyrannies. By night, she was the daughter of a brilliant fugitive, piecing together a 15-year-old conspiracy from the ghost-like whispers in her father's diary. Her father's words echoed in her mind. The answer is with him. The key is split in two. He has the other half. It's the first thing he ever gave me. She had to get to Harrison Blackwood. But how a waitress couldn't simply request a meeting with a man who lived in a self-imposed exile surrounded by layers of security thicker than a bank vault. Writing a letter was out of the question. It would be intercepted and dismissed by an army of assistants. She needed a way to bypass the walls to send a message only he would understand. The answer, she suspected, lay somewhere in her father's notebooks. They were filled with dense engineering concepts, but she began to notice a pattern. Scattered among the complex schematics were doodles, seemingly random strings of numbers and references to childhood stories, the same stories her father used to tell her stories she thought her mother had invented in her confusion. There was the Silver Knight and the Binary Castle, and the princess who spoke in prime numbers. They weren't just stories, they were ciphers. Her father, the ultimate engineer, had embedded security protocols into her childhood. One entry in his journal caught her eye. Harrison and I built our first venture on a handshake and a simple substitution cipher from Mrs. Davison's 8th grade algebra class. He was always so proud of it. Our unbreakable code. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble based on the ramblings of a man on the run. But it was all she had. She quit her job. She walked into the Gilded Sparrow, handed Mr. Dubois her apron, and endured his sputtering indignation with a calm she didn't feel. "I'm pursuing a new opportunity," she said simply, and walked out, leaving him speechless for the first time in his managerial career. Her new opportunity was to walk into the lion's den. Blackwood Industries headquarters was a shard of obsidian thrusting into the Manhattan skyline. Its lobby was a cathedral of cold marble and steel, manned by security guards who looked like they were carved from granite. Elara, dressed in a simple but professional black blazer she'd bought from a thrift store, walked up to the main reception desk. The woman behind the desk regarded her with an expression of bored intolerance. "I'm here to see Mr. Blackwood," Elara said, her voice betraying none of the terror screaming through her veins. "Do you have an appointment?" The question was a dismissal. "No," Elara said. "But please give him a message for me. After." She slid a small sealed envelope across the marble counter. "Tell him it's about Mrs. Davison's 8th grade algebra class." The receptionist's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. It was the most ridiculous message she had ever heard. She was about to call security, but something in Elara's unwavering gaze gave her pause. With a sigh of theatrical exasperation, she picked up her phone. Elara waited, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was sure she would be thrown out, laughed out of the building. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then a man in a dark suit with an earpiece emerged from a frosted glass door. He didn't speak to the receptionist. He walked directly to Elara. "Miss Vance?" he asked, his voice low and devoid of emotion. "Mr. Blackwood will see you." He led her through a maze of silent white corridors through security checkpoints that scanned her from head to toe. The air grew thinner, the silence more profound, with each floor they ascended in a private, high-speed elevator. They finally stopped at the top floor. The doors opened directly into an office that seemed to occupy the entire penthouse. 3 of the walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a godlike view of the city below. And there, standing in the center of the room with his back to her, was Harrison Blackwood. He looked older than he had in the restaurant, the weight of his empire and his past etched into the rigid set of his shoulders. Mrs. Davison gave a quiz every Friday. He said, his voice a gravelly rumble that echoed in the cavernous space. He still hadn't turned around. The final question was always a bonus, an encrypted message. A26 Billionaire 501, a simple substitution cipher, child's play. The first message was, "Teamwork makes the dream work." Elara said, her voice surprisingly steady. "You and my father used it as the first password for your startup." He turned slowly, his eyes cold and grey as a winter storm widened almost imperceptibly. They weren't fixed on her face, but on the small silver locket resting against her blazer. "Who are you?" he breathed, though he already knew the answer. Elara took a step forward into a shaft of sunlight cutting through the glass. "My name is Elara Vance." She pulled the single-dollar bill from her pocket and placed it on his vast, empty mahogany desk. "And I believe you have something that belongs to me." For the first time in 15 years, the mask of the ruthless billionaire shattered. In his eyes, Elara saw not a titan of industry, but a man haunted by a ghost, the ghost of his only friend. The insult at the restaurant had been a desperate prayer, and she was the impossible, unbelievable answer. While Elara Vance was walking into the heart of Blackwood Industries, a different kind of meeting was taking place across the city. In a sterile minimalist office overlooking Central Park, Marcus Thorne, CEO of Thorne Dynamics, watched a live feed on a large monitor. The feed was from a discreet high-resolution camera positioned across the street from the Blackwood Tower, zoomed in on the lobby. He watched as a young woman in a simple blazer was escorted by Blackwood's head of security into the private elevator. "Run facial recognition," Thorne commanded, his voice a low, dangerous purr. "Cross-reference her with everything we have on Blackwood's known associates' employees' contacts. I want to know who she is." His subordinate, a wiry man with nervous eyes named Gavin, typed furiously at a console. Marcus Thorne had not become a billionaire by accident. While Harrison Blackwood built walls around himself, Thorne built networks of information. He had spent a fortune on corporate espionage for over a decade, his primary target always being the man who had publicly, if indirectly, accused him of theft, Harrison Blackwood. He knew about Blackwood's reclusive habits, his erratic behavior, and most importantly, his bizarre decade-long ritual of leaving single-dollar star notes as tips in high-end restaurants around the world. Thorne had long suspected it was a code, a search. He just didn't know for what or for whom. Now it seemed the search was over. "Sir," Gavin said, his voice tight, "we have a match, but it's impossible." "Nothing is impossible, Gavin. Speak." "Her name is Ilara Vance, 24 years old, currently resides in Queens. Until yesterday she was a waitress at the Gilded Sparrow." Gavin paused, swallowing hard. "Sir, she's Daniel Vance's daughter." The air in the room went still. Marcus Thorne stared at the frozen image of Ilara's face on the screen. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same intelligent eyes, the same determined set of her jaw. For 15 years, the ghost of Daniel Vance had haunted him. Vance was the one loose end, the one man who could prove that Thorne hadn't just tried to buy stolen tech, but had orchestrated the entire frame-up from the inside using moles within Blackwood's own security team. Thorne had assumed Vance was dead or had vanished forever. He never imagined he had a child. Blackwood found her. Thorne whispered, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. After all this time, the old fool actually found her. This changed everything. If the girl was there, it meant she likely had a message from her father. It might even mean she knew where Vance had hidden the real prize, the prototype, and the final activation key for Project Chimera. The data Thorne had acquired 15 years ago had been a decoy, a useless pile of corrupted code that had almost bankrupted him. Daniel Vance had outsmarted them all. "Where did he meet her?" Thorne demanded. "The Gilded Sparrow, sir. 2 nights ago," Gavin reported, pulling up restaurant receipts and credit card records. "Blackwood dined alone. The check was over $1,500. He tipped $1. Thorne laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Of course he did. The signal. And the girl was smart enough to see it. Smarter than her father, perhaps. He was a genius, but far too trusting." Thorne stood up and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. The city sprawled beneath him, a kingdom he had fought and cheated to conquer. But the real throne had always eluded him, the one built on the world-changing power of Chimera. Now a waitress from Queens held the key. "Gavin," Thorne said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "I want her under 24/7 surveillance. I want to know where she lives, who she talks to, what she eats for breakfast. I want a full spectrum analysis of her digital footprint, and I want a team ready to move. The moment she leaves that building, I want her. Move, sir, as in acquire her?" Gavin asked nervously. "No, not yet," Thorne mused. "Let the girl and the ghost have their reunion. Let Blackwood tell her everything he knows. Let them lead us right to the prize. Daniel Vance was sentimental. He would have hidden his legacy somewhere meaningful, somewhere personal. The girl is the map. When she finds the X that marks the spot, then we will move, and we will take everything." His gaze fixed on the Blackwood Tower across the city. He could almost feel the energy of the conversation happening in that penthouse office. A father's legacy, a friend's guilt, a daughter's quest for justice. It was all so beautifully dramatic, and he was about to write the final, brutal act. The shadow of his ambition, cast 15 years ago, was finally falling over the last unsuspecting player in his long game. The waitress had just walked out of the frying pan and into the heart of a raging inferno. In the penthouse office, the silence was a living thing, broken only by the distant wail of a city siren. Harrison Blackwood stared at Elara, his face a canvas of emotions. He hadn't shown the world in over a decade. Regret shock and a flicker of something that might have been hope. "I searched for him," Blackwood said, his voice raspy. "For years. I hired the best private investigators in the world. They found nothing. It was like he'd stepped off the face of the earth." "He didn't want to be found," Elara replied, her calm exterior belying the storm inside her. "He knew you wouldn't believe him. He wrote in his journal that Marcus Thorne had framed him, that there was a leak inside your company." Blackwood flinched at Thorne's name. "I was a fool," he admitted, turning to look out at his city, his kingdom built on a foundation of broken trust. "I was arrogant. Thorne was a jackal snapping at my heels, and I was so obsessed with beating him that I couldn't see the enemy I had already let inside my own walls. When the data vanished and the evidence pointed to Daniel, it was easier to believe the lie." He walked over to a sleek, minimalist bookshelf and pressed a hidden panel. A section of the wall slid back to reveal a safe. He entered a code, and the heavy door swung open. From inside, he retrieved a small, velvet-lined box. "Your father was right," Blackwood said, placing the box on his desk. "The key to Chimera is split. He created an encryption so complex that no computer on Earth could break it. It required two components, a physical catalyst, the prototype, and a digital activation key. The key itself was split into two halves, two unique alphanumeric strings that are meaningless on their own, but when combined, unlock the entire system." He opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was not a key, but a simple, elegant fountain pen. It was silver, with a fine, intricate engraving along its barrel. "The first thing he ever gave me," Blackwood said, his voice thick with memory. "We had just secured our first round of funding. We were celebrating in a cheap diner. I told him we needed to sign the partnership agreement, but all I had was a chewed-up ballpoint. The next day he gave me this. He said, for signing all the billion-dollar deals to come. I've kept it with me ever since." He handed the pen to Elara. It was heavier than it looked. "I never knew," he continued, "but Daniel in his genius embedded his half of the key within the pen itself. It's stored on a microscopic data chip, shielded from any kind of remote scan. My half of the key to his life's work, and I never even knew I was holding it. And my father's half," Elara asked, her throat tight. "That's the question I've been asking myself for 15 years, Blackwood confessed. He said in his final encrypted email to me, the one I dismissed as the ravings of a traitor, that he had secured his half. He called it the comet's tail." Elara's gaze dropped to her locket. The symbol, the comet star. Then she looked at the pen in her hand. The engraving along the barrel wasn't just a pattern, it was a star chart. And there, at the end of the star chart, was a single comet-like star. Her symbol. "It's not a place," she whispered, her mind racing, connecting the dots her father had so carefully laid out. "It's an object, his half of the key. It's in my locket." It seemed impossibly simple, and impossibly brilliant. The two halves of the key had been separated by a chasm of betrayal, and time one kept in a billionaire's vault, the other worn around the neck of a waitress, each holder unaware of the other's existence. Blackwood looked at her, his eyes wide with dawning realization. "Let me see." With trembling fingers, Ilara unclasped the locket. It was an old, simple piece of silver, something no one would ever look at twice. She handed it to Blackwood. He took it to his desk, which shimmered and came to life as a high-resolution touch-screen interface. He placed the locket on a scanning pad. A complex diagram of the locket's interior appeared on the screen. "My God," he breathed. He used laminated microplating. The photo of him. It's not paper. It's a shielded data wafer. Your mother must have known on some level what she was giving you. He placed the fountain pen next to it. The system requires proximity to join the two halves. Once we do that, it will give us the location of the prototype. He hid it somewhere safe, somewhere only the completed key could reveal. It was the moment of truth, the culmination of a 15-year search, the answer to a lifetime of questions. Blackwood looked at Ilara, his expression one of profound apology. "Ilara, I can never repay you for what I did to your father to you. But we can restore his name. We can show the world what he created." He initiated the sequence. On the screen, two complex strings of code appeared, one from the pen, one from the locket. They began to intertwine, to merge. A progress bar appeared, decryption in progress. Suddenly, every light in the office went out. The massive screen died, plunging the room into the dim ambient light of the city. An alarm, shrill and piercing, began to blare. "What's happening?" Ilara cried out. Blackwood's face was grim, his body rigid. "We have a breach," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Someone has cut the power and overridden my security." His personal phone, running on a separate network, buzzed to life. He glanced at it, and a look of cold fury settled on his face. It was a text message from a number he knew all too well. It contained only 3 words: "Checkmate, MT." Marcus Thorne had made his move. The lion's den had been breached not by force, but by a ghost in the machine, and they were trapped inside with the hunter. The emergency lights flickered on, casting long, dancing shadows across the penthouse office. The shrill alarm was silenced remotely, replaced by an unnerving, profound quiet. Harrison Blackwood moved with a speed that belied his age, his mind instantly shifting from remorseful friend to ruthless strategist. He's not just in the system, he's in the building. Blackwood stated, his voice a low, controlled growl. He wouldn't make a move this bold unless he was here to personally collect the prize. He quickly snatched the pen and the locket from the dead interface on his desk. "How your security—" Ilara began, her heart pounding. "My head of security 15 years ago." Blackwood said, his eyes hard as flint. "The man I hired after Daniel warned me about a leak. He's been on Thorne's payroll from the beginning. I fired him years ago, but he would have known the architectural schematics, the back doors." A voice, smooth and laced with smug triumph, echoed from a hidden speaker in the ceiling. "You always were a slow learner, Harrison. Brilliant at building things, terrible at judging people." Marcus Thorne. "It's over Thorne." Blackwood shot back his eyes, scanning the room for the source of the sound. "The police have been alerted by the security breach. The building is on lockdown." Thorne's laugh was a dry, condescending chuckle. "You're locked down, Harrison. I've controlled this building's network for the last 12 minutes. The alert that went to the police was a false alarm caused by a power surge. My men are on their way up. They will be the only ones getting in or out. Now be a good loser. Place the pen and the locket on the desk and step away." Ilara's mind was racing. They were trapped. Thorne had them cornered, dozens of stories up, with his own private army on the way. They had the 2 halves of the key, but they were useless without the location of the prototype. The decryption had been cut off halfway through. "He's bluffing." Blackwood muttered more to himself than to Ilara. "His men can't get to this floor without my biometric authorization." "Oh, I won't need it," Thorne's voice replied, dripping with amusement, because you're going to give it to me, in exchange for her. On a large monitor that suddenly flickered to life, an image appeared. It was a live feed from a camera in the lobby. Maria Ilara's kind former colleague from the Gilded Sparrow was standing at a bus stop outside, looking at her phone. A black van pulled up beside her. 2 men got out. Before she could react, they had bundled her inside, and the van was speeding away. "Maria," Ilara gasped, her blood turning to ice. "A simple insurance policy," Thorne said coolly. "Your friend from the restaurant. It seems you listed her as your emergency contact. A very loyal friend from what my people tell me. It would be a shame if she were to have an accident. Give me the keys, Harrison, or the waitress's friend pays the price for your stubbornness." Blackwood looked at Ilara, his face a mask of fury and helplessness. He was checkmated. He could sacrifice the company's future and his friend's legacy, or he could sacrifice the life of an innocent woman. But Thorne had made a critical miscalculation. He was playing chess against Harrison Blackwood, the king. He had overlooked the queen. Ilara's mind flashed back to her father's journal, to the stories he used to tell her. The Silver Knight and the Binary Castle. A tale about a knight who couldn't break down the castle walls, so he taught the princess to send a message by tapping on the pipes, using binary code to communicate with the friendly village outside. It was a bedtime story. It was a lesson in asymmetric warfare. "The decryption," she whispered urgently to Blackwood. "Did it finish enough to give us anything?" Any fragment. Blackwood pulled out his personal tablet, which operated on an independent military-grade network. He typed frantically. "It's corrupted. Incomplete. Just a string of geo-coordinates." He showed her the screen. It was a location somewhere in rural upstate New York. It must be the location of the prototype. "No," Ilara said, her eyes wide with sudden clarity. "It's not. My father was paranoid. He would never make it that simple. This is a decoy, a trap for anyone who got this far." "What are you talking about?" "The story," she said, thinking fast. "The binary castle. The real message isn't in the data, it's in the way the data is presented." She looked at the raw code on his tablet, the lines of jumbled numbers and letters that the decryption had managed to spit out before it was cut off. It looked like gibberish, but it wasn't. It was a pattern, 1s and 0s hidden within the alphanumeric soup. "It's a message," she breathed. "He encoded a message in binary within the corrupted file itself." "Talk to me, Thorne." Blackwood stalled, his voice booming through the office, buying her time. "What's your plan? You get the prototype, and what you'll be a fugitive." While Blackwood kept Thorne distracted, Ilara worked her fingers, flying across the tablet's screen, isolating the 1s and 0s. It was a simple code her father had taught her when she was 6, a child's game. The binary string resolved into a set of numbers. It wasn't a location, it was a patent number. U.S. patent, 183542. "Got it," she mouthed to Blackwood. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He turned his full attention back to the invisible Thorne. "All right, Thorne, you win. I'm placing the keys on the desk." He started to walk towards the desk, but then Ilara spoke, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the tension. "The real key isn't here, Mr. Thorne," she called out. "My father wasn't a fool. He knew someone like you might one day get this far." She turned to a stunned Harrison Blackwood. "The prototype isn't hidden in some secret bunker," she said, looking him right in the eye, hoping he would understand. "It's been in plain sight the entire time. It's the first thing he ever gave you. But it's not the pen." Blackwood's eyes widened in comprehension. He remembered. The partnership agreement. Their first startup. It failed within a year, but the company was still registered. And attached to that company was its very first patent filed by Daniel Vance. A patent for a novelty desktop power source. The patent office had dismissed it as impractical. No one had ever looked at it again. The patent number: US Patent 6183542. The prototype wasn't an object. It was an idea hidden in the world's largest public database, disguised as a failed invention. The pen and the locket didn't reveal a location. They provided the patent number and the activation key to unlock its true potential. "He's lying." Thorne's voice boomed, a hint of panic in it now. "My men are at the door. You have 10 seconds. "Go ahead," Blackwood said, a wolfish grin spreading across his face. "The patent is public domain. While your thugs are breaking down my door, my lawyers are filing for an emergency injunction and activating the technology under its original patent. By the time you get in here, you'll be locked out forever. Your entire plan, 15 years of scheming, undone by a public record." Silence. The only sound was the hum of the emergency lights. Marcus Thorne, the master manipulator, had been outmaneuvered by a ghost, a billionaire and a waitress who listened to her father's bedtime stories. The silence from the speakers was more damning than any scream. Marcus Thorne, a man who always had a calculated response, was speechless. He had played a 15-year game of chess, only to have the board flipped over by a move he never saw coming. The elegance of Daniel Vance's plan was breathtaking. He hadn't hidden his greatest invention in a vault that could be breached. He had hidden it in the one place Thorne would never think to look in plain sight, disguised as a failure. From the elevator, a heavy thud echoed, followed by the metallic screech of prying tools. Thorne's men were getting impatient. "It's over, Marcus," Blackwood said, his voice resonating with the cold authority of a king reclaiming his throne. "You can have your men storm my office. They will be met by the full force of my corporate security, who have now been alerted to your specific location in the building. You can run, but my digital forensics team is already unwinding the web you spun inside my company. Every mole you planted, every piece of data you siphoned, it's all leading back to you. By morning, Thorne Dynamics will be a crime scene." A beat of silence, and then a guttural roar of fury erupted from the speaker, followed by the sound of something smashing. The connection went dead. Thorne was running. Blackwood immediately got on his tablet, his fingers a blur. "Security, this is Blackwood. Seal all sub-level exits. Subject is Marcus Thorne, 45th floor server room. He is to be considered hostile. Apprehend, do not engage." He then made another call. "Get me a line to the DA's office. Tell them I'm ready to make a statement regarding the Daniel Vance case. Yes, the one from 15 years ago, and tell them I'm bringing evidence." As the sounds of running footsteps and muffled shouts echoed from the floors below, a sense of surreal calm descended upon the penthouse. Ilara sank into a leather chair, the adrenaline that had sustained her finally giving way to bone-deep exhaustion. She had walked in here, a waitress seeking answers, and had emerged as the key to toppling an empire. "He saved us," Blackwood said, quietly looking at Ilara with an expression of profound awe and gratitude. "Daniel. His brilliance saved us." He pulled up the old patent file on his tablet. There it was, a novelty desktop power source. The schematics looked deceptively simple, but with the activation key, the combined alphanumeric string from the pen and the locket, the true world-changing complexity of Project Chimera was revealed. It wasn't just a power source, it was a blueprint for a new world. Hours later, the building was crawling with federal agents. A pale, disheveled Marcus Thorne was led out in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief and impotent rage. His moles within Blackwood Industries were rounded up one by one, and Maria, shaken but unharmed, had been located and secured by the police, Thorne's men having abandoned her as soon as their mission fell apart. In the quiet of the now secure office, as the sun began to rise and paint the sky, in hues of orange and pink, Harrison Blackwood turned to Elara. The weight of 15 years seemed to have lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a clarity he hadn't possessed in a long time. His name will be cleared. Blackwood promised, his voice thick with emotion. The world will know Daniel Vance as the hero he was. A foundation will be established in his name to fund the next generation of engineers and thinkers, the kind of brilliant minds he would have championed. He paused, looking at the young woman before him, who possessed her father's intellect and a strength all her own. Project Chimera is as much your legacy as it is his. Blackwood Industries needs a new vision. It needs a conscience. It needs a Vance. I want you to stay. Not as an employee, but as a partner. Help me build the future your father envisioned. Elara looked out the window at the sprawling city below, a world she had only ever served from the sidelines. The offer was staggering a life she could never have imagined. It was justice. It was a future. It was everything her father would have wanted for her. She thought of the years of struggle of her mother's slow decline, of the quiet loneliness that had defined her life. Then she thought of her father's journal, his words of love and faith in her. My North Star. She turned back to Blackwood, a small, genuine smile touching her lips for the first time that day. I think, she said, her voice clear and steady, I'd like that very much. Her journey had started with $1 an insult, designed to make her feel worthless. But that dollar had become a key, unlocking her past and rewriting her future. It was a reminder that true value isn't measured in wealth or status, but in intelligence, in courage, and in the unbreakable bond between a father and the daughter he knew would one day finish his work. The story of Elara Vance and the $1 tip is a powerful reminder that the smallest actions can have the most profound consequences. $1 meant as an insult became a symbol of hope, a catalyst for justice, and the key that unlocked a 15-year-old mystery. It shows us that beneath the surface of our ordinary lives, extraordinary destinies can be waiting. Elara wasn't just a waitress. She was the heir to a brilliant legacy, and she had the strength and intelligence to claim it. Her story proves that dignity isn't something that can be taken away by the rich or powerful. It's something you own. If this story moved, you please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you won't miss our next story. What did you find most inspiring about Elara's journey? Let us know in the comments below.